Welcome everyone. My name is Wendy Malenfant. I'm an assistant professor in the College of Education here at the University of Maine at Presque Isle, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Chelsey. I got to know Chelsey because I had her in courses last year. She came as a post-bac student from New Brunswick, and I instantly fell in love with her. She is dynamic, she is fun-loving. There's absolutely nothing not to love about Chelsey. She's so passionate about everything she does. She has an infectious laugh, she has contagious enthusiasm, and on top of all of that, her work ethic is above reproach. So if you don't already know and love Chelsey, I can assure you that by the end of the evening you will. So I would like to welcome Chelsey.
So before I start at all, it's actually Wendy's birthday. So I just want to say happy birthday, Wendy, and thanks for sharing it with me tonight. But I can't tell you how excited I am to be here. Other than it being a complete honor to have been asked to be one of the students in the Distinguished Lecture Series, I'd say that for the last easily 10 years, whenever someone's asked me what my dream job is, it's been one of two things. So it's either been a professional storyteller. I have no idea what that industry looks like, even really how to get involved in that. But I'm still curious, or it's been to be a motivational speaker. So when Wendy asked me, I absolutely jumped at this opportunity, and I think that after this evening, I'll be a bit better suited to answer if that is something I still want to do, because A, this will let me know if I'm any good at it, and if I do enjoy talking in front of large groups of people. So I need my clicker. But more importantly, I'm going to share with you an unconventional journey. And that is basically, I've been asked to talk about my life. So I would say that my life thus far has been everything but average or typical. And I want to share with you some of my adventures, some of my experiences. I'll even talk about a few of the mishaps along the way. And so, how they'll help as my future as an educator. But throughout my discussion, I'm really going to look at two areas. Can you hear me if I don't use the microphone? Yeah, okay, I think I'd feel more comfortable that way. So I'm really going to talk about two areas. I'm going to talk about education, and I'm going to talk about passion. And because I consider these to be the foundation, or the building blocks, for what we all ultimately hope to accomplish, which is success and happiness. And I would like to start, because as a future educator, I know how important it is to define things really well for students, or for anyone for that matter. So I would like to start with my definition of education. I really think education, well, it's life. Education is all of the doing, it's all of the seeing, it's tasting, it's smelling things, it's experiencing things, it's stepping outside of your comfort zone, and it's taking risks. And to be able to achieve these things, you need to have passion. So what is passion, or what do I consider passion to be? Well, passion is the power and the enthusiasm, the ambition that an individual needs to be able to achieve those wonderful things. And I don't think that someone can be truly successful without the mixture of both. Because someone who is educated, well, they become credible, and they're a problem solver, and they're curious. And then someone who is passionate, they're motivated, and they're driven, and they're resilient, and they'll do absolutely anything to accomplish what it is that they want. So, I think that if you're able to harness passion and education, combined with sometimes having to step out of that comfort zone and take a risk, well then you can do almost anything that you set your mind to. And I stand before you today as a small example of that. And that would include things like traveling in 27 foreign countries, or teaching English in Seoul, South Korea, studying Mandarin in China, opening and running go back to school and fulfill one of my other passions, which is education. So on that note, I'm now going to talk about all of these examples, and I'd like to start with actually growing up on a potato farm. So I would absolutely say that my first form of education came from growing up on a potato farm. So I remember at, let's say July, 6 a.m. when I'm helping my father rope potatoes or pick rocks. And all my other friends, they were working at the town pool, and they were working on their tans. And I was working on my tan, a farmer's tan. But the last thing I would have said was that I'm so fortunate and blessed to have been brought into this potato farming family. No, wouldn't have said that. Definitely not. But from a very young age, my brothers and I, we were taught life skills that would remain with us forever. And those are the same skills that I use on a daily basis. Those are the same skills that have given me employment over someone else. Those are the same skills that have opened doors of opportunities for me. And those are the same skills that have allowed me to be recognized in a number of different facets. So what are these magical skills? Well, it's actually something we all know. It's responsibility and it's hard work. And these characteristics, they've really transformed or helped me become the individual that I consider who I am today. Now, I'm sure we can all relate to a number of different experiences and life experiences when we've used responsibilities and it's been hard work. But maybe you've never thought of it as education before. But that's exactly how I consider my upbringing. It was very informal, tangible education. And I consider this very monumental in my development. Now, was I passionate to become a potato farmer when I grew up? Well, I had thought about it, but not exactly. And my boyfriend happens to be a potato farmer, so perhaps there's more to it than I know. But what were these lasting effects, other than helping with all of this responsibility and hard work? Well, I can't sleep past 5 a.m. It's actually terrible, and with the time change, it's really 4 a.m. I also am checking the weathernetwork.com 5 to 7 times a day. It's a problem, like maybe an obsession. And there's also my biceps. I have abnormally large biceps for a female, and now you're all going to notice, and they're even like protruding a little bit in my sweater. And then finally, I would say I have the vague understanding of a rain dance. So when we were younger, and it was maybe a summer where we weren't getting enough rain, my mom would send us outside to perform a rain dance. I think it was to get us out of the house, but we would all run around in circles, and so there's neighbors that would attest to this being true. But what else? Now, I apologize because this is the only slide that they're not my original images. When I was in China, not everything was digital, so I didn't have a cell phone back then, and everything wasn't just in our pockets. So these have been taken off of Google. But my second experience came shortly after I graduated from high school. My family hosted a Chinese exchange student, and his name was Miko. And Miko stayed with us for a time in February. Miko absolutely loved Canada. He loved poutines, he loved cheese, he loved all of the food, except poor Miko hated the cold weather. And I had a hot pink winter jacket, and that's actually what Miko chose to want to wear while he was in Canada at that time. He didn't have enough warm clothes with him, so he wore my hot pink jacket. But this opportunity meant that the host students would be able to in turn travel to China. So I absolutely jumped at this opportunity, and my parents, they were a little bit nervous, like, well, you're the only daughter, there's that, and the only words you can say in Mandarin are, I love you, and hello, maybe thank you, so there's that. I'd be traveling solo to China. I would meet up with a group when I got there. We all realized this was an amazing experience, so we made the arrangements and I was off to China. Now I need to share this story because I consider it to be one of those turning points. I was on the airplane traveling to Beijing, and I was flying at this point from Toronto to Beijing on a direct flight. And I was given my airplane lunch with chopsticks. Most people would have practiced using chopsticks beforehand. Absolutely did not. So I remember opening the packaging and I was starving, and I tried with one hand, it didn't work. And then I tried stabbing things with two hands, and I remember getting frustrated, and the elderly Chinese lady next to me, at first I thought she was angry because I couldn't understand her, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I've crossed some cultural boundary, I've really offended this woman, this is terrible. And then I realized she was actually trying to help me, so she was giving me an informal tutorial on how to use chopsticks. But the reason I'm bringing this experience up is because for the first time ever in my life, I felt completely vulnerable. I was traveling to a country where I didn't know anyone. I was traveling to a country where I couldn't speak the language. And I was traveling to a country that I couldn't even eat properly. This was a very humbling experience. There were a lot of other amazing things that took place while I was in China. I visited Tiananmen Square, I took Tai Chi lessons, I did learn to eat with chopsticks, and I stood on the Great Wall of China. I remember being on the Great Wall of China, and this man comes up to me and for some reason asked what my name was, and I said, oh, it's Chelsey. And in his broken English, he said, Chelsey Clinton? And I have blonde hair and blue eyes, and Bill Clinton had been in office, a few years before this. And I'm like, no. And before I could really explain myself, I was holding babies, I was in pictures, and I just went with it. And so now I'm sure I am a conversation piece for some of these Chinese families. They're like, this is the day we met Chelsey Clinton on the Great Wall of China. I maybe should have tried a little bit harder to say that no, but I went with it. But there was something about this trip, and I think it was a combination of the independence mixed with that vulnerability. Maybe it was the people I met, but it really sparked something inside of me. I was motivated to find meaning for these unconventional and challenging experiences. Now, what exactly had I done to achieve this feeling, really? Well, I had stepped outside of that comfort zone, and I had taken a risk. Now, I'd like to elaborate on the fact of taking risks just for a second, because people are wired for comfort. We love things that make us feel safe, and we love things that make us feel secure. We love things that we know the final product of, and we love experiencing things that we know the outcome of. But that's normal. But think about this. Those times that we feel those really proud moments and we're able to achieve really wonderful and amazing things, well, that often happens when we take a risk. Because when you take a risk, you grow. You grow without even realizing that you're growing. Now, I don't mean that everyone needs to skydive or swim with sharks or feed seagulls or tigers. I think you would learn a lot about yourself by doing those activities. But I mean, we need to sometimes make decisions that are so unlike us that people are like, what? We need to do things that are unconventional. We need to do things that scare us. We need to do things that absolutely make us feel uncomfortable. And we need to do things that we second guess ourselves about. Because again, that's the way that we grow. I think when you put it all out there, and I've done that maybe too many times, but when you risk that thought of failing, when you risk that People will judge what you're doing. You learn the most about yourself. And I can guarantee from experience that it's actually those instances that you will grow as a person. So taking risks actually brings me to university. And in the fact that when I was applying to go to my undergrad, I only applied to universities that none of my friends had applied to. And I had amazing friends all through school. But the reason was, I loved that feeling I had when I was on my own. That feeling of independence, that feeling of having to figure things out. And I thought the best way to do this would be starting over and going to school. I absolutely struggled with the idea of going to university. Because at the age of 17, I was being asked, constantly being asked. I remember in my senior year and grade 12 year, the questions, they were relentless. But I struggled with the idea of knowing what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Like, I had no idea what I wanted to do in a month's time, let alone what I thought I would enjoy doing when I was 40 or 50 years old. And I think some of the worst questions that we can ask students are posed in such a way as this. What do you want to do for work? What do you want to do after you graduate? And what do you want to do with your life? Now wait before you all say what? And I did this presentation for, a similar presentation for a grade 8 class. And I'm like, just wait, because that's not completely what I mean. But these questions and how they're asked, they're stressful. And we don't know the answer. We don't have enough experience when we're 17 years old to be able to answer that question with full truth to ourselves. But I think if we were able to ask the question maybe in a different way, we could ask students, what are you passionate about? What do you enjoy? What would you enjoy doing for the rest of your life? Those are the very same questions, but they're asked in a less threatening way. That being said, I went to Mount St. Vincent University and I received my undergraduate degree in political science, business, and a marketing certificate, but I had actually gone to school to take public relations. It was very soon into the program that I knew it just wasn't for me. Public relations, I would be writing press releases and I would be writing a lot of speeches, but I actually wanted to be the voice and the face behind those speeches. So I made the changes and this is where I ended up. But it was only 4 years and then I was at that stage again. 4 years later, and what next? And the questions, they all start again. What are you doing now? What are you going to do for work? So are you going back to school? Are you getting a job? Well, 4 years later, I still don't know what I want to do. Don't know yet. But I did know that I was motivated to travel, and I was motivated to find more unconventional education, and I was motivated to find more unconventional experiences. So I started looking online, and I found a teaching English opportunity in Seoul, South Korea. And I remember having a few Skype interviews and a few phone conversations, and it was with a Canadian company, and I said, okay. I signed a year-long contract, and I was gone. I remember getting to the Incheon airport after probably having traveled around 36 hours, and I was so excited to finally be off the plane, and my school had told me Andy would be picking me up. So I said, okay, Andy, he'll have a sign with your name on it. So I go out, have gone through security, and I see the sign, and I see Andy. I'm like, hi. He's like, I'm like, okay, well, he's here at least. And then Andy takes me to get my luggage. And the whole time, he was looking at me really strange, actually. And he would look at his paperwork, and then he'd look back at me, and finally, he's like, is this you? So, let's just take a little pause. the school wanted you to send a photo of yourself. Well, I thought something really professional, so I sent a passport photo. Well, anyone who's had a passport photo taken, it looks like a mugshot. So you have no hair in your face, you're not allowed to smile, everything's symmetrical, and you look like you committed a crime. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. He's like, oh. I'm like, uh-oh, you don't want me? And he's like, no, you so much better in person. I'm like, thank you. And he's like, no, we were scared you'd be mean to the students. Oh, he's like, why did you send this picture? I'm like, well, I need to be more specific on your website. Say you want a smiling photo. So just for anyone out there who might want a similar experience, send a nice, happy photo. But I loved my experience in Korea. I taught at a private school, and I taught kindergarten students who were roughly age 5 and 6. And I tried to share as much of my life in Canada with my students. They love to see pictures of my animals, because in Korea, most of their animals have to be house pets. So when I showed them a picture of my German Shepherd, they thought it was a horse. And they also love to see pictures of where I grew up on a farm, again, because they're used to seeing tall buildings. So these were all really interesting things for my students. But at the same time, I really wanted to integrate myself into their culture and do as much as I could to really embrace my time and experience while I was in Korea. This is a picture taken on a trip back to visit, because I made lifelong friends while I was teaching in Korea. But I stepped outside of that comfort zone. I did something that was definitely taking a risk, and the rewards were so absolutely great. This experience allowed me to combine my passion with those unconventional learning experiences with something I loved, which is education. I would say that Korea was really the tipping point of my journey for travel. I was in Cambodia, and this is the sunrise over Angkor Wat. So you set your alarm for 3 in the morning, and you take a carriage or a buggy ride to get there to see the sunrise over these amazing structures. Cambodia was really interesting, and it was a sad country by times to be in, because they've recently suffered a mass genocide. And so the picture here on the left, that is of all of the skulls that they actually had found from the killing fields, where close to 1 million people were fatally executed. And again, this is just one of the beautiful structures there. I've been to Vietnam, where I've seen the effects of Agent Orange and people who are still suffering from this. There were a lot of homeless people, and Vietnam was, again, another moving experience for me. Thailand, I tried to learn to meditate, and I rented a scooter, which I wrecked. I did not wreck it in that big hole. However, that is one of the roads that you would have to travel on daily. So it's just pictures like this that really put our life here into perspective. I've visited 17 states. I've been in every province. I still need to get to the territories. I've been inside the Grand Canyon. I've worked and lived outside of Glacier National Park. I've driven the Pacific Coast Highway, the Icefield Parkway. I've driven across Canada 9 times, so I have a lot of speeding tickets. Yeah, those crutches. I've spent 3 months in South America, and in Buenos Aires, Argentina, I had to learn how to seek medical attention. I'm a really terrible dancer. And when I went to the doctor with my foot, he looked at me, and he looked at the x-ray, and he said, "How?" In broken English, "How did you do this?" I'm like, "Well, I was dancing." And he said, "Very serious, stone face, you are a terrible dancer." And I'm like, "Well, thanks, yeah, I am, I know." I've also hiked Machu Picchu. I've climbed an active volcano. I've driven around the country of Iceland. I've hiked in endless national parks. I've watched a world qualifying soccer match. I've volunteered at an orphanage in Chile. But I just want to pause for a moment, because I'm telling you these experiences not to imply that my life has been better, or I'm definitely not trying to brag. I'm just showing you that it's different. And my passion, which I discovered early, has been able to take me to some of these remarkable places. And not only did I read about these world events or these historic monuments, I've actually been to them. I've actually seen them with my own eyes. And the reason I want to share these experiences with others is it's to let people know that it's okay, that there's a different way to do things. Because I think society sometimes tells us that there is a set way that we should move through our life, and I am definitely here to tell you that there's not. Life is absolutely what you make it, and I've made choices. I've had to make sacrifices. I've made decisions to allow me to live this lifestyle. I'm one of those people who strongly dislikes the word someday. And I think it's Tom Cruise whose face is behind that, but he says, someday is code word for never. Well, it really, in my mind, it really is. We all can picture that person or ourselves who say, someday I'm going to go there. Oh, someday I'm going back to school. Someday I am absolutely going to start up that business. What are you waiting for? Speaking of some days, I would like to now completely switch gears and talk about one of my biggest accomplishments and educational feats and risks to date, and that would be co-owning and operating my own business, which is a food truck, with my youngest brother. So how did this happen? Basically, I was talking about investments with my brother Devin. And one thing led to another, and I found myself Googling food trucks in our area. To be completely honest, I did not think there would be any food trucks for sale in New Brunswick, let alone northwestern New Brunswick. So when this beauty showed up only 2 hours away from us, I was flabbergasted. I made a few phone calls and a few arrangements, and Devin and I decided that we would go and meet the current owners of the food truck. Without our parents' knowledge, we each took out our entire life savings. We actually drove to the bank that morning and we're like, okay, we want all of our money in cash, please. And it's a small town, so she was like, oh. We're like, nope, yep. She's like, well, we're like, yep, everything, thank you. We took all of our money in cash and we drove 2 hours to see the food truck. Well, it was love at first sight. I mean, it was pristine condition. The inside was beautiful. It was fantastic. We had never eaten at a food truck before, been in another food truck before, or even considered buying one before, but this one was perfect. With this, we didn't need to look at any more. We wanted this one. So we went with the couple and we negotiated on a price, and they agreed to drive it down to us the following week. We moved fast. But not only was it enough that we bought a very expensive truck, we also wanted to completely rebrand, repaint, and really make it our own, which this is actually the final product, the Purple People Feeder. I would love to take even an ounce of credit for what the end product looked like. That was all Devin. I tried to help him. I'm built for speed and not accuracy, and that was very evident in my painting skills. He's like, okay, yeah, I need help. So he let me try and paint around the back brake light, and I managed to smear paint all over the brake light, and he's like, nope, that's it, you're done. Now, there were lots of other things that I could do. So 3 months of phone calls, trying to find someone to insure us. There was also the food inspections that we had to go through. We bought the food truck in March. and it was ready to go by May. So we worked fast. I would say the food truck was a huge success. It was a novelty idea, and we had a huge social media presence. It was so much fun to drive the food truck. Kids loved the food truck. And not only that, we actually ended up having really great food. People kept being like, "Can you cook?" Well, we'll learn. That part I didn't even really think about. All I was concerned with was getting the truck ready. And they're like, "But can you cook?" I'm like, "Yeah, that'll come." So Devin could not cook anything at first, but he ended up being an amazing gravy connoisseur or maker. It was a big hit. And now I have countless stories that I could tell you about the food truck. I'm thinking about writing a book just about the summer we had the food truck. I'll share a few of my favorites with you. One was the day Devin lost the brakes. So it is a beautiful day, and Devin takes the food truck to go to work. I'm like, "Great, Dev, go sell some French fries." Yeah. So maybe 10 minutes later, I get a phone call, and it's Devin. I'm turning around. "I'll be home in a few minutes." "No, Dev, come on. This is a really expensive hobby we have." He's like, "Well, I almost died." I was like, "What do you mean you almost died?" "I lost the brakes." And just luckily, the truck rolls to a stop before something more severe happened to Devin. So there was that. There was also the time I hit a parked car. It was the first weekend that I was taking the food truck by myself, and there were 2 rows of parked cars that I had to maneuver through, and then parallel park the food truck. But I did that, I thought. So 3 hours into the event, this very irate man approaches the window, and he says, I wasn't working at the window, one of our employees were, and she's like, "Chelsey, you really need to talk to this man." He's like, "Yell, yell, yell, food truck, you hit my vehicle." I'm like, "No, sir, you must be mistaken. Maybe it was like one of those green and purple dirt bikes zooming around." And he's like, "No, your paint is everywhere." So I get out of the truck. Yeah, sure enough, his side mirror smashed, and my little fin on the side, the serving fin, that was in my blind spot. So I did hit his mirror. That was not a great day. We also blew up one of our deep fryers. We were preparing fries, and all of a sudden, like 3-foot flames were rolling out of the top of the deep fryer. And Devin is like, "Shut everything down." I'm like, "Oh, I thought it just stopped." And then I was really famous. We had these metal cabinets inside the food truck, and I was really famous for never locking those. So I whip out of one of our events, and I hear the smash, bang, and then a can of ketchup flies by my head, and there's onions rolling all around, and I almost died. And probably the worst story was when the food inspection lady did one of her surprise visits. And again, those metal cabinets, things had shifted. So she's looking things over, and she decides to open one, and a sword of a knife flew out at her and almost impaled her in the shoulder. It flew onto the fryer where the hamburgers were cooking, and she just looked at me. She's like, you gotta fix that. I'm like, "Don't you worry, Stacy. That is top on my priority list." So those things, they really did happen. But the food truck, in all seriousness, it was able to offer me such a unique and different experience, one that I'd never had before. First, being able to work with my brother in such an endeavor, it was truly amazing. And when we're together now, talking about the summer that we bought a food truck, it's absolutely hilarious. I mean, he also lost his eyebrows, and there were other things that they'll be in the book, so stay tuned. But it was so rewarding, and we also had to work with each other's strengths and weaknesses in order to make this a success. For Devin, he hated being in the public's eye, and we could not do anything without someone wanting to talk about the food truck. And then for me, it was anything mechanical, the propane tanks, or one night I couldn't even find the windshield wipers, how to work those. So that we definitely used each other's strengths and weaknesses for that to be a success. Now, this is actually awesome because just maybe 2 months ago, my friend in Calgary saw this post online, and it says, 17 bucket list food trucks in the Maritimes you have to eat at. and ours happened to be number 7 on the list. So this alone made me be like, yes, it was totally worth it. I'm constantly still being asked, do you regret getting that food truck? And my answer is very simple, no way. But then some people will pry a little bit further, but would you do it again? And that's when I say, well, I'd think about it longer than a week. I'd give it a little more time. But what was next? How did I end up back at university, and how did I end up here? Well, of course, it wasn't necessarily a straight and narrow direction for me. I actually booked a one-way ticket to Spain shortly after the food truck, and I was planning on doing the 800-kilometer pilgrimage walk through Spain known as the Camino de Santiago. Well, if you haven't already gathered, I can be a little bit spontaneous, and I know it's one of my redeeming qualities, but it actually can sometimes be a little bit of a downfall. Well, I was very ill prepared for my time in Spain, actually. I was going in the off season. I was planning to go in, or I was there in November and December. So that throws a whole other element into the experience alone, because a lot of the albergues, they're called, they're closed down in the off season, which means you have to plan for a much longer day than if you were there in the summertime. You could walk 10 kilometers versus 25 kilometers. I also had no real notion of what I needed to pack, so I had overpacked, I was carrying too much weight. Long story short, I ended up suffering an injury which made my Camino come to an end. But I remember being on the train ride, on my way, making my way eventually back home. I was on the train to Lisbon, and I remember sitting, writing in my journal, being completely content. I was so happy, which was strange because I hate not being able to finish anything. But I remember thinking that this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Although things didn't play out how I had planned or how I had hoped, I was doing and I was exactly where I needed to be. And the short time, which I ended up doing 7 days and close to 200 kilometers of the Camino. So in that time, I figured out a lot of things, because you have nothing but time and yourself really to talk to. There's a few people you meet along the way. But I realized I wanted to share all of these experiences, all of these life events. I wanted to share those. And then what better way than through education? And especially since I have chosen such an unconventional way, I thought this would be a really special addition to someone who wants to ultimately be in education. Now, that would be taking another risk, because I would be much older going back to university, so it was a scary decision. There were a lot of uncertainties surrounding this decision, but here I am, and I couldn't be happier. I'm now only 4 weeks away from finishing my teaching practicum, and I've done that in a kindergarten classroom, which I absolutely loved, and now I'm working in a grade 2 classroom, and I absolutely love that. People are always asking, well, what age do you want to work with? It's so hard to know. They're all so great and have just different things to offer. But UMPI has given me such a rich educational experience with the small classroom sizes and the really hands-on experience that I've had here. It's been wonderful. And I know that this is just the next step for me. I know that I'll never stop wanting adventures and wanting to do more exploring. But as I come to my lengthy conclusion, why does it matter? Why does any of this really matter? What the big so what? So what have all of these things done for me? Or what have they shown me? How have they helped me? How have they made me a better person? And more importantly, what are you going to take away today from all of this? Well, I've broken it down into four areas. And the first is that the world is small, and it's not nearly as scary as we're led to believe. We hear so many simply terrible and horrific events and circumstances, but there are so many wonderful and heartwarming and amazing things happening that we never hear about. We never hear about all of the good that's taking place. And when it's all boiled down, no matter what country I was in, what culture I was in, everyone ultimately wants the same thing. People want to be happy, but not everyone knows how to do that. Speaking of people, the second thing that all of this that I've realized is that people are simply wonderful. In all of these experiences, from the food truck to the woman who sat beside me and helped me use chopsticks, people are wonderful. And they're wonderful if you allow them to be wonderful. I can't tell you all of the amazing people I've met or the stories that I've become a part of. It honestly just brings a smile to my face when I think about all of these different experiences. Patience. Especially in our society. Our society is so concerned with things happening now. We're constantly trying to break records. We're mad if we don't get our coffee exactly when we want it. If there's a red light, oh no. Everyone, I think, can work on patience, and I really think that our specific culture could work on patience. Traveling has taught me patience. There are so many things that are absolutely out of your control, and the only thing you can do with it is just wait it out. There's nothing else you can do, and a lot of times they're not even speaking a language that makes sense. So you really are that person that's like, okay, I'm just gonna wait this out. Someone will help me. And they do, they always do. But I think everyone could probably work on patience. And finally, living in the moment. And this is something I think I'm still working on. But we have to realize that what we're doing exactly right now is exactly what we need to be doing. People are constantly planning about their next step. We're constantly worrying about the lesson plan we have tomorrow, the email that we need to write, and those things are all going through our head. And we're missing out on all of the great things that are happening right now. Because when we're thinking about all of those other things, time goes by so fast, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, that's right, everything, it's done, it's all over. One of the ways I did this was I started to really appreciate and notice the sunrise and the sunset wherever I was. And I really made a point to embrace and take notice of this, because this was my new day. That sunrise was saying, this is exactly where I need to be right now. And the sunset was the close to this. So as you maybe have noticed, I have a lot of pictures with a sunrise or a sunset, but those are really meaningful for me because I was doing what I was supposed to at that moment. My experiences they've opened my eyes. There's no way around that, and they've absolutely humbled me. They've made me a greater person. They've made me appreciate simple things in life, things that we take for granted on a daily basis. They've made me appreciate. I love listening to different languages. I love trying new foods. And all of these things I've learned because I've taken a risk or I've been willing to try something new. I've definitely chosen an unconventional journey, but I wouldn't want it any other way. And the people that I've met or the stories that I've become a part of, that's the best part. That's what makes me happy when I think about all of these amazing opportunities. So I hope that I've been able to share with you just a little glimpse of maybe someone who's done things a little bit differently. Maybe even giving you a different perspective, different perspective on life. Perhaps I've given you a nudge to step outside of your comfort zone, maybe even take one of those risks. And on that note, I'd like to sincerely thank everyone that was here tonight. It means so much to see so many familiar faces, but you've all helped me because this was one of my Sundays, and here I am. So I think that Aristotle, will end with him. He said, educating the mind without educating the heart, well, that's no education at all. And that's truly what I believe. Thank you.
So you see what I mean? You can't not love this girl. We went on a trip last spring.
Yes.
We took some education students downstate, and I needed, because of our supervisor, the other supervisors couldn't drive, they said, well, do you have a student who could drive? And I was like, Chelsea's driven a food truck. I didn't know about the accident, but other than that, I knew she was the girl. And so we found out about her book, and so all of the students and I were, we're all talking, like, how do we get in this book? Like, what do we have to do to get in this girl's book? Because there's going to be a book, right? You know there's going to be a book. So I have the pleasure of being her supervisor for her student teaching. So seeing this girl in action is just short of magical. She just engages students. She's a people magnet. Kids, adults, everyone around her wants a little piece of this, and you can see it. So I'm very honored that I've had the opportunity to work with her and now see her in action. And so we have a little gift from the Distinguished Lecture Series Committee and all of us here at the University of Maine and Presque Isle. So again, let's just give her a hand.
Thank you.
So I don't know if anyone has any questions for Chelsey about her adventures. I know she'd be happy to answer them because I bet you have some. And if you don't, if it's more comfortable to just kind of mill around and chat with her after, but I'll just open it up in case anyone wants to.
Do you still do the food truck?
Oh, I forgot. I was supposed to say that. Hold on, I'll say that right now. Sadly, we only kept the food truck for one summer because Devin actually got a real job. And he moved out west in July, and we kept the food truck until October. So that means that with the dear help of my mom and dad, who were really great at making gravy too, we sold it. We only had it one summer. I know, but really great poutines. It's actually how I met my boyfriend. He was the potato supplier. So it's all about the food truck, like really. I think I could easily write a book though about the food truck. It would be called "The Summer I Bought a Food Truck." Bestseller. Thank you. Just email me or something.